Welcome into Minnesota Vikings Now. I am Tom Downey, and we've got videos coming out pretty much every single day here on our Vikings channel. And if you want constant updates on free agency, draft, trade buzz, and of course coaching drama, hit that big red button and subscribe right now. Tom Downey here for Chat Sports. We begin today's video with the official, at long last, finally official news that Kevin O'Connell has been hired as the Minnesota Vikings head coach. We knew this was going to be the case for a while now, but now the team has officially announced it, which means the terms of the deal have been agreed to. O'Connell himself put out a statement as well, part of the Minnesota Vikings announcement of this move, saying, quote, "I greatly appreciate the Wilf family, Kwesi," that's the GM, of course, "and the entire Minnesota Vikings organization for providing the opportunity to be their next head coach. This is a franchise with a deep history and a tremendous fan base. Having been on the visitor sideline at US Bank Stadium and experienced that environment as an opposing coach, I am excited to now have the support of these passionate Vikings fans. I am committed to working tirelessly to bring them a Super Bowl championship." Now for the rumors, and Deshaun Watson trade is suddenly back on the menu as ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reports that Minnesota could be in the running to land Watson. Now, of course, Deshaun is still facing multiple allegations for sexual misconduct that as of right now have still not yet been resolved, that lurking as a large black cloud over his future as an NFL player. But it does make some sense for Minnesota if the off-the-field stuff gets cleared. Here's what Fowler wrote. "The Vikings have intriguing young pieces in Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook, and they face a decision on the contract of Kirk Cousins, a 2023 free agent who has a $45 million cap hit in 2022. New coach Kevin O'Connell, however, conveyed a strong belief in Cousins during his interview process, relaying a vision for maximizing his skill set." My questions are a couple twofold here. A, was O'Connell being honest in that interview? Remember, you want to be a head coach, you'll tell whatever you think the organization wants to hear. If it's true, then does O'Connell want to bring in Deshaun Watson? From a talent standpoint, Watson's better than Kirk Cousins. And Minnesota does have those young offensive pieces that would be alluring to Watson's side of it, wanting to go to a destination where he can win more games than he apparently thinks he's going to be able to do in Houston, which, that makes some sense there. So what do you think? Should the Vikings trade for Deshaun Watson? We'll spend some more time on this topic momentarily, but I want to get your thoughts first and foremost. Type in Y for yes, they should, N for no, they should not. This is the pinned comment on today's video. So if the ad break comes here on YouTube, take advantage of it. Head down there and sound off. More on Deshaun from a talent standpoint. I mean, you kill for this QB, right? This is one of those franchise guys that, although I like Kirk Cousins, although I think he's a good football player, I don't consider him to truly be one of those elite franchise guys. He's a good player. You could do a lot worse, but he's not elite in the end. So for Watson, be an upgrade. But there are two big red flags here beyond the desire of Minnesota. Let's say they're all in, right? Off the field, massive issue. Can you trade for somebody facing the accusations, the multitude of them, that Watson is facing right now? I'm not so sure. And this part, too. If the off-field stuff gets cleared, does Minnesota have the assets? They have a top 15 pick this year. That would be one such asset they could give up. But if the whole point is pairing them with your good young players, teams like the Eagles, the Giants, for example, have more draft capital than what Minnesota would be able to offer. So if it came down to a bidding war, which it may or may not, well, you're in a tough spot. And it would also require you to trade Kirk Cousins in a deal, either to Houston, which doesn't make sense to them, or somewhere else. That's not a surefire lock to have happen, plus you might have to eat a bunch of dead money if you were able to do it. So it's not a yes, go do it. There's a lot of steps you got to figure out along the way if you're going to be able to make a big deal for Deshaun Watson. If it does go down, we'll break it down. And even if not, we'll break down other moves that Minnesota makes all offseason long. News, rumors, draft, free agency, you name it. You've come to the right spot here on Minnesota Vikings. Now we are barely 50 subs away from 2,500. Let's get there. Subscribe right now. We mentioned trading away Kirk Cousins. Well, this could be part of it. How about trading Kirk Cousins to the Denver Broncos? The Athletic made that prediction part of their, the 10 bold, mostly bold is what they called it, predictions on QBs this offseason. Cousins is uncuttable, a $45 million cap hit, all of which is guaranteed by the organization, but a trade would save $35 million in salary cap space. Here was the Athletic's pitch. The Broncos have a couple of connections to Cousins. One, general manager George Payton was in Minnesota with him. That's true. And two, Clint Kubiak, Gary's kid, is now their passing game coordinator / QB's coach. Kubiak was the Vikings quarterback's coach in 2019 and 2020 and their offensive coordinator last season. The Broncos, for better or for worse, have more intel on Cousins than pretty much any team in the NFL. Having said that, there's no way a team is trading for Cousins on his current contract, which carries a salary of $35 million for 2022, and that is it. Two issues would need to be resolved before the Vikings could trade Cousins. One, how much of Cousins' salary would the Vikings be willing to eat in the form of a signing bonus that they would pay and not have the new team pay? And two, what type of draft compensation would a team be willing to give up to acquire Cousins? I think Denver is desperate for a QB, but I think that last slide there from The Athletic nailed the issue with Kirk Cousins. He's a good player, not worth $35 million in a singular season. So the new team could just take on Cousins and restructure his deal, extend him. Do they want to lock themselves in? I'm not so sure. Of the $45 million, could you talk Minnesota into eating another, maybe $10 million of that and make it a little bit more of an even split? Maybe. Would also potentially drive up the cost to acquire Kirk Cousins. That's the back and forth. And they're kind of like in baseball, when you're making a trade, a team might eat more money to get a better draft pick or prospect back in exchange. In this case, the draft pick could go up if a team does that. So what would you do with Kirk Cousins? Can't cut him. Doesn't make any sense. Let me know in the comments. Type K for you to keep him. C for you find a way to cut him. I don't know, maybe Cousins decides he wants to give the Vikings back someone who can go start. That's unlikely. Or type in T for you to trade him. Todd McShay has put out his latest NFL mock draft for ESPN, and he mocked Trent McDuffie off the board early in round one to the Minnesota Vikings. I'll make note that Stingley and Sauce Gardner were off the board in this mock draft. Quarterback is a major unknown right now for the Minnesota Vikings, and it does make sense to spend a premium pick on a corner. But is McDuffie the right guy? Andrew Booth was there. I might have preferred him. Here's what McShay wrote. The Vikings have used 4 first-round picks on DB since 2013, and one more here would tie them with the Packers for the most over that 10-draft span. It's still an issue because none of those corners are still on the roster. Minnesota allowed 5.7 yards per play last year. That's 26th. And its top 2 cornerbacks, Patrick Peterson and Mackenzie Alexander, aren't under contract. McDuffie is smooth and displays good route recognition. As an aside, this is another spot where quarterback wouldn't be shocking. Kirk Cousins has one more year left on his deal. So perhaps new GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and new coach Kevin O'Connell decide, I'll take a step forward in the future, especially with Malik Willis still there. So we'll come back to McDuffie. But Willis would be an interesting pick. And of the fits that I like for Malik Willis, I kind of think Minnesota would be a good one. If you've got a young, offensive, quarterback-minded guy in charge, and you could draft Malik Willis, sit him for a year, allow him to learn because he needs time. He's not going to come in and instantly be Justin Herbert, I don't think. But he has the traits that teams love. Built like a running back, moves like one, very strong arm, also remains inconsistent as a pure drop-back passer. He needs time to grow and develop in that particular area. Now, Willis, in terms of the instant impact, would not be the same as what I think Trent McDuffie could be. Now, his interception numbers were never all that high, but he allowed a sub-45% completion rate. He allowed 111 total yards at Washington. Now, look, I think a big part of that is that teams didn't really want to throw his way at all. They instead targeted Kyler Gordon a little bit more. Oh, and by the way, Washington was bad, so teams didn't have to throw it that much on them necessarily. What this really comes down to for me is what's the bigger need? Is it quarterback? Long-term answer there if you think Malik Willis is that guy. Or do you want to look more towards a different position? You want to look at instead maybe a cornerback spot. So of the two options here, what do you think is the bigger need for the Minnesota Vikings? Type in CB for cornerback or type in QB for quarterback. Of course, that also comes down to what you do with Kirk Cousins in the end. Right this second, I think it's corner. But we'll break down plenty of NFL draft coverage here on the Minnesota Vikings right on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't already, go subscribe right now.